If you can remember, when you decided to sponsor Valleydale Church, what kind of vision did y'all see?
Well, I believed it was going to be a good, strong church. I could see it reaching a lot of people in that area.
5 years ago, we gathered at our Yes to the King 25th anniversary celebration. And I challenged you as a church to join with me in building a church for unchurched people.
We are here to talk about this wonderful house behind us, especially this door. About 50 years ago, I was a lot younger. We both were. But what did we use this house for?
We used it on Wednesday nights. We had church service here.
I was here when it really started small, very small. In fact, the first Sunday we were here, 35 people were in attendance, and we were 5 of them.
First of all, I've got a basic philosophy that it's not my job to bring a vision to a church. It's my job to know what God's doing in a church and help articulate and lead in that direction.
A big thing that we did was we kind of broke some of those Sunday school classes up into multiple groups, gave people a vision for multiplication. We started the campus downtown with Iron City. It's now, of course, its own flourishing independent church. So we wanted to move the church to a mindset of multiplication.
I said, we got to have a building. We're not going to attract anybody with that little permastone building that seats 100 or less. It was way beyond our capability at that particular time. But every one of those guys that were in there, they were saying, if this is what God says do, let's do it. A pastor has to teach his people what's important.
And missions has always been the heartbeat of Valleydale. In fact, the church was begun, as I'm sure has been said, and you know, because there was a need for an evangelistic church in this area. The vision was cast for unchurched people.
I just knew that this church, there was a greatness about this church that needed to be excavated. It's not that it had to be created, it just needed to be excavated. It needed to be uncovered again. And so my vision, my first message after I got in there was to say, we're gonna walk as one, and we're gonna have fun doing it.
I'm Paul Moore. I served at Valleydale from 76 to 83. And I was here when it really started small, very small. In fact, the first Sunday we were here, 35 people were in attendance, and we were 5 of them. And attendance was very low. And actually, I am the 3rd pastor of the church, not the 1st. This picture here is our first unit that we built. There was another unit.
Wow.
Yeah. There was another church building that had been brought in here. It had been in the way on the interstate on 5920 in Inslee, and it had been in the way. And so they had to move it. They sold it, dirt cheap. And they moved it in, and it was, that's what we came to. We didn't come to this. This materialized, I came in August of 76, and I discovered that there had been a study made by the Shelby County Planning Board, and they were predicting what this area would become. And so I took that and went to Nashville in October. I came in August, went in October. I went to Nashville, and Nashville used to have a church architect department where they would help church design buildings and so on and so forth. So I went there and asked him to design a master plan according to what this Shelby County Planning Board said we would become. And they designed 5 buildings on the property. And in December, they notified me it was ready, and I picked it up. We zeroed in on building number 1, which is this building. And the church voted to build. Now, $25,000 budget, and they voted to build. Because I guess I said, we got to have a building. We're not going to attract anybody with that little permastone building that seats 100 or less. And so we voted in January to build. And we had an architect that helped me design that building, this building here. And his first rendering was, first class, so to speak. And so we had to cut it down because we didn't have the money to do it. Nobody would loan us the money. And so once we got it cut down to where it was a building we could handle financially, the church decided to put it out for bids. And it came back $265,000 to build one building. And of course we could not afford that either. And so my wife ran into somebody who had a Baptist deacon from over at Hueytown Baptist, had built 3 or 4 churches over there. And so I called him and asked him if he would consider building our building. So he came by and picked up a set of plans. And the next week he brought them back and gave me a bid of $175,000. But we still didn't have no money. So I contacted a bond company that was located here in Birmingham. And he came down and looked the situation over, looked our budget over, and he said, for any other church and any other pastor, I would not touch this with a 10-foot pole. He said, y'all can't pay this back. And so I convinced him that we needed $175,000, so he wrote $175,000 worth of bonds. And when they went on sale, I got on the telephone and called a trucking company in Dothan, PCY Trucking Company, and they were looking for some church bonds. And I sold them $58,500 worth of bonds off on the telephone. So we knew we were off and running then, we had, we had a third of our bonds that had been sold. And so when the bond guy came and, they always set up a Sunday night program where they explain what has to happen and this and that and the other. And he said, now we're going to issue these bonds. We're going to stand behind them. And but you're going to have to get out and sell them. The church members are going to have to get out and sell them. And I said, in your opinion, how long will it's going to take us to sell these bonds? And he said 4 months. And I have a tendency sometimes to open my big mouth and say what pops into my mind. And I said, well, how about let's sell them in 4 days? And there used to be a restaurant over here just down the road called the Hungry Fisherman. And he said, if you sell them in 4 days, I'll buy everyone on this bond team a meal, and we'll go eat. Well, I had an ace in the hole because I had a deacon named Orby Mays, and he whispered in my ear on Wednesday night, he said, when we come back in, I'll take what's left. Well, we had about maybe $15,000, I guess, still left to sell. And We came back in and we had nothing. Yeah, we had nothing. And so I called the bondman up and I said, okay, get out your billfold. I said, they all have been sold, $175,000 in 4 days. And so we went and ate a supper meal off of our bondman.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, I'm Calvin Kelly, and this is my wife Paula, and one of our 2 daughters, Alyssa. And we came here as pastor and family in August of 1984. Our 27-year history could kind of be divided, in my mind, in 2 parts, pre-relocation and post-relocation.
Okay.
So the pre-relocation part was the 80s and 90s. And during that time, the economy was great nationally. Reagan was president. Housing boom. This area was just exploding. And as my friend Buddy Gray at Hunter Street used to say, his 6-year-old son could have pastored the church and would have grown. So it just would grow, and we had explosive growth in the 80s and 90s, and we did largely big event kind of evangelism. We'd have just all kinds of national speakers and musicians come in. Dino Kartsanakis, E.V. Hill, famous black pastor from L.A., Dr. W.A. Criswell, First Baptist, Dallas, Tim LaHaye, Dinesh D'Souza, Cal Thomas, nationally known syndicated columnist, Oliver North. And so it was a come and see kind of evangelism. Yeah. And as we were growing, we were going to multiple services, and on our 25th anniversary, ironically, we announced the formulation of a dream team to study what to do. We'd gone into 3 services on 2 different occasions, which ultimately led to the relocation in 2004. And so one of the greatest memories I have is walking down that mile march from our old location, where Rock City Church is now, to this location on the last Sunday of February 2004. The next Sunday, March the 7th, was the first Sunday in this building. And since that time, the church has taken on a different tenor, more of a go and tell evangelism, which is our missions emphasis, and that's really when we started our annual missions week that is still going on today. And missions has always been the heartbeat of Valleydale. In fact, the church was begun, as I'm sure has been said, and you know, because there was a need for an evangelistic church in this area. The vision was cast for unchurched people, and through the years, certain phrases come to my mind of how we would try to articulate a place of grace. One of our mission statements was to provide the best opportunity for people to become fully devoted Christ followers. And early on, as far as outside of the area, missions was more typical kind of Southern Baptist institutional, through the Home Mission Board at that time, through the Foreign Mission Board at that time, now International Mission Board. And it's more like giving to a program. Mm-hmm. But then later it became not just institutional, but more personalized. And a lot of that, honestly, was through the leadership of Bob Waters. Yeah. He went on a trip to Israel that I sponsored. And I remember we were praying on what's called the Lysistratus. It's the pavement of the Praetorium, or the fortress of Antonia. And it's certain to be the very surface that was in existence at the time of Jesus. And it's believed to be the place where he was flogged and tried. And our group was just in prayer, just intense prayer, kneeling on that floor. And Bob was so moved by that, God placed in his heart, he later told me this, that was when he began to have a vision for the world. And through his leadership as a layperson, Valleydale, he's largely responsible for how God has led the church the last 20 years since we've been in this location, in this international, national, as well as local missions focus. That's a huge emphasis. And so, we've shifted through the years from that idea of institutional giving to missions versus personal connections to missions opportunities, where I'm not just giving, but I'm going. Yeah. And that's just been a huge part of Valleydale, and it's actually gratifying to us today to see how that just continues and grows and grows and grows and builds and builds and builds year after year.
That's awesome.
I'm Dan Hall, and I had the privilege of really meeting Valleydale in the late 2000s. Pastor Calvin would go on sabbatical, and Jeff and I had been friends for several years, and so he had thrown my name in the pot to come fill in, and turned into 3 years in a row. I got to come preach during the summers. So when Pastor stepped down, I was asked to come meet with the personnel team, and David and the group met. If I remember right, we met at Jimmy's office, and on a Sunday afternoon in December of 11, I started, and I served till March of 13. First of all, I've got a basic philosophy that it's not my job to bring a vision to a church. It's my job to know what God's doing in a church and help articulate and lead in that direction. And so my first goal in any church, whether I'm there, every pastor goes as an interim. It may be a 40-year interim, it might be a 1-year interim, but it's not his church. He's there for a season. So when I came, I did, in meeting with the personnel team, I said, I want to be senior pastor till you find a longer-term senior pastor. I'm not pulpit supply. I'm a leader. I want to be able to lead. So we were able to build that kind of relationship. As I got in and began to pray, the only two things the Lord gave me clarity on, the gift that I was to bring to the church, was that I was to lead us toward unity and toward joy. Because I don't know that we were divided. We were just independent. Every piece was kind of separated from the others. And I just felt like we could get unified. Secondly, people didn't smile much. There wasn't much greeting beyond people's little tribe. If you came in, you'd see your same 6 or 8, 12, 15 people maybe. You would talk to them, but there wasn't much crosstalk. And I just knew that this church, there was a greatness about this church that needed to be excavated. It needed to be, and when I say excavated, it had been hidden. It had lived. It's not that it had to be created. It just needed to be excavated. It needed to be uncovered again. And so my vision, my first message after I got in there was to say, we're gonna walk as one, and we're gonna have fun doing it. And so I told jokes. I don't think you have to tell jokes to be a good preacher, but I was not going to let the heaviness of the church rob me of a good joke. And so I would tell them, and people reluctantly began to laugh. They began to relax a little bit, and we began to see both those things happen. And I feel like by the time we left, we had achieved both those. There was great unity in the church and tremendous joy in the church.
Jason Dees. I had the great privilege to be at Valleydale. I came in March. My first Sunday was March of 2013, and my final Sunday was, I think it was August 28th of 2016. When I felt like we got to Valleydale, it felt like the church had kind of gone through some trauma. There had been some church dividing that had happened, and it felt very siloed too. There was a lot of strong Sunday school classes that were surviving, but that's kind of what the church was, a collection of Sunday school classes. It just didn't seem very unified or like it had any kind of common vision and purpose. And I think a lot of that was just the reaction to some of the trauma of the previous years. And so I feel like the Lord led us here to give the church a new vision, to get the church more focused on really who they could be for the Lord, to take some big steps. And so, a big thing that we did was we kind of broke some of those Sunday school classes up into multiple groups, gave people a vision for multiplication. We started the campus downtown with Iron City. That's now, of course, its own flourishing independent church. So we wanted to move the church to a mindset of multiplication when we really got here. And now Valleydale had a strong missions kind of emphasis, and I think we were just able to really pour fuel on that fire and help people understand the multiplication is really a part of the mission of Christ. I am so grateful to have been connected to Valleydale just because I think that there are such obedient and faithful people here that just needed in that time a little nudge, a little direction. And so, yes, I mean, I think we saw, Valleydale, we were able to refinance the debt, which was a huge step. We were able to rewrite our bylaws, which was a huge step to kind of modernize the bylaws, really bring the staff up to speed, install elders. We launched the campus downtown with Iron City, and we really moved our groups into a multiplying way, and even did a lot of work, obviously, with missions, bringing on, before that, it was just really led by a lay leader, Bob Waters. Ross came on and gave leadership to our missions area, which has just added fuel to that fire. We increased that budget tremendously. We started the counseling center. So there's just a lot of things that the church, I think, was a little bit in shock and needed just some fresh vision and some fresh wind. And of course, we were only here 3.5 years, but we so believe that God had us here for that time to kind of reinvigorate the church, and then we're just so grateful for the steady and wonderful leadership that Pastor Mac's giving now.
Awesome.